Let's begin doing the work to set up all the components, files and folders that we need to implement this MongoDB driver. And the first task for us is going to be setting up or doing some scaffolding and just getting the different pieces that we need into our Express API. So head on over to Visual Studio Code, make sure that your containers are up and running and be ready to go. And if your containers are running, let's get started. The first thing I want to do is in our lib folder, I want to go ahead and create a new folder here. So this is going to be a subdirectory within the lib folder. And we're going to call this initializers. And the idea with this folder is it's going to house any files that we write that are going to be dedicated to initializing certain software or databases or anything like that. So this will be a good place for us to store our MongoDB driver. Before we do that, let's create an index.js file. This will act as the root file in this folder that we want to export, so that just to account for if we have multiple different services that we want to initialize, we can just kind of aggregate them in this file and then export it in one go. Before we start writing any code, let's just create one more file here, and this is going to be mongo.js, and this file is going to be dedicated to creating our MongoDB driver. Let's begin our work here in the index.js file. I'm going to create a to-do here, and we're going to import the setup Mongo function. And so this is something that we still need to create, but it's just a reminder for us to do it once we've written the actual code to do that. And so this index.js file is going to export one function. We'll set that up by saying export const initialize app, and so this will be an arrow function. I want this function to take in two arguments. The first one is going to be the app, so that I want this to be the instance of Express that we've created in our server.js file. And the second one is I want to inject the whole config object into this function so that we've got that available, which we will need once we've implemented the setup Mongo function, as well as any other initializers that we write down the line. We can then just inject the config into those functions so that they have access to the environment variables that they will need. Now that we have this function block scoped here, we can just create a comment here, and let's just say the first step here is to initialize MongoDB. Obviously this code hasn't been written yet, but for now let's just do a console log. What I want to do here is just test that this file is connected correctly. So we'll just for now say MongoDB setup and connected. Once we've got this console log set up here, let's just head on over to our server.js file. Let's go ahead and import this function that we've just created. So we'll import initialize app. This will be from the new initialize folder that we've created. So it'll be initializers.index.js. Once we have that function imported, right after the setup root here, we're just going to say initialize app. And then we're going to pass in the HTTP server, as well as the config. And then I'm just going to hit save there. And when I hit save, you're going to see that we do get this console log out here into our terminal. And so that we know that this now is connected and that export function is working correctly. And before we move on, I just wanted to do two quick refactors here. One change that I want to make to our server at this stage is instead of this constant being called HTTP server, I actually want to just rename it to application or app here. We're going to go ahead and rename every instance of HTTP server, and then we're just going to change that to app. And so it's just in these 4 places that we need to change that. Just hit save and make sure there are no errors or anything like that. And I think that's just going to be a bit more clean, a bit more concise, and it's going to match up with the way that we've been writing our initializers and our setup routes and all of that. The second thing is I know that this initialize app is going to be an asynchronous process, especially with something like setting up MongoDB. It could take a while to set that up. So what we want to do is just add the wait keyword here, and in order to do that in the correct way, we need to make sure that this outer function is marked as async. So just go ahead and mark that as async, and then we've got the wait here. And then the last thing we need to do there, just make sure your work is saved. And in the index.js, we also just want to mark our function here as async. With those two changes, I think our index.js has been set up correctly here. And let's go ahead and implement this setup Mongo function. So in your mongo.js file, you can just open that up. And let's open up an export function block here. We're going to say export const. We'll say setup Mongo. And this will be an arrow function that we export. And in order to set up Mongo, as we'll see in a couple of lessons time, we're going to need some environment variables. And in our index.js, we've got this config object, which is imported from here. That config will be passed through to the initialize app function. And when we invoke the setup Mongo function, we can just pass that config through. And so I'm going to just use some destructuring here, and I'm going to preemptively destructure a key that we're going to add to our config in a moment called Mongo, and then we'll have access to all the Mongo variables that we need to set up Mongo. Before we actually write the code to do that, let's just go ahead and write a console log here. We're going to say testing mongo.js file. I'm going to go ahead and save that. The last step to wire this up is just to implement this to-do that we had over here. We can say import setup Mongo, and that will be from the mongo.js file. I'm going to hit save, and once we've imported it, we can just go to this comment here. We said initialize MongoDB, and we can just invoke this setup Mongo function. We want to pass through the config, and then I'm just going to go ahead and hit save, and you should see our console log here testing Mongo.js file, and that validates that our work that we've done to scaffold out our initializer here for MongoDB has been set up correctly, and everything's wired together to our main Express server. We've got that scaffolding set up now to go ahead and start implementing the actual code to set up this MongoDB driver. So let's take a short break here. In the next lesson, we'll look at installing Mongoose. So I'll see you on over there. Cheers for now.